October 28, 1980, Boston Music Hall. Bob Marley suddenly threw his guitar into the crowd and walked off stage after seeing something in the balcony that made him whisper, "Not again, not here's." Write in the comments, where are you listening to this story from? And what time is it right now? The Boston Music Hall was electric that Tuesday night. 3,500 people packed into the historic venue. The October air outside crisp with autumn, inside thick with anticipation and smoke. Bob Marley and the Wailers were 7 songs into their set, the crowd swaying as one body, when everything changed in an instant. Bob was mid-strum, his beloved Gibson Les Paul guitar catching the stage lights, when his eyes drifted up to the balcony. His fingers froze on the strings. The smile that had been playing on his lips vanished. The music didn't stop immediately. The Wailers continued for several beats before realizing something was wrong. Then Bob Marley did something nobody had ever seen him do before. He pulled the guitar strap over his head, held the instrument for a moment, like he was saying goodbye to an old friend, and threw it into the crowd. Not gently. He hurled it with force, with anger, with something that looked like fear. Not again. Those close to the stage heard him whisper, "Not here." And then Bob Marley walked off stage, leaving the Wailers, the crew, and 3,500 stunned fans in absolute confusion. But what happened next would become one of the most powerful moments in music history. Stage manager Danny Williams rushed after Bob, finding him in the narrow corridor behind the stage, his back against the wall, breathing hard. "Bob, what's wrong? What did you see?" Marley's eyes were distant, focused on something from the past. "December 3rd, 1976, he said quietly. "The man from my house, the one who tried to kill me, he's here." Balcony, 3rd row, blue jacket. Williams felt his blood run cold. Everyone knew about the assassination attempt at Bob's home in Jamaica. 2 days before the Smile Jamaica concert, gunmen had burst in, shooting Bob in the chest and arm, his wife Rita in the head, his manager Don Taylor 5 times. Miraculously, they'd all survived, and Bob had performed at the concert anyway, showing his wounds to the crowd as proof that music was stronger than bullets. "I'll get security," Williams said, reaching for his radio. "No." Bob's hand shot out, grabbing Williams' wrist. "No police, no violence, not again. Bob, the man tried to kill you, and he failed, but I survived. You understand? I survived for a reason." Wait until you hear what Bob Marley did next. While the crowd grew restless and the Wailers stood frozen on stage, Bob made a decision that would define the rest of his life, which, unknown to everyone that night, had less than 7 months remaining. "Bring him to me," Bob said. Williams stared. "What?" "The man in the balcony. Tell him Bob Marley wants to speak with him. Backstage. Alone." "Bob, that's insane." "Is it?" Marley's eyes blazed with something beyond fear or anger. "4 years I carry this. 4 years I look over my shoulder. 4 years I wonder why. Tonight, we end it, but not with blood. Bring him." Security Chief Marcus Thompson would later file a report that would never be made public. In it, he described approaching the man in the blue jacket, a thin, nervous-looking individual about 35 years old, with scars on his hands and a tremor he couldn't control. The man's name was Samuel Clarke, though he'd gone by many names over the years. When Thompson whispered that Bob Marley wanted to see him backstage, Clarke's face went white. "He knows. He knows." Clarke stood up slowly. People in nearby seats noticed something was happening. The energy in the venue shifted, uncertain, electric, with the wrong kind of electricity. But the detail that would shatter everyone's expectations was still coming as Clarke was led backstage. Peter Tosh grabbed the microphone on stage. "Technical difficulties," he announced. "Bob will return. While we wait, and the Wailers began an instrumental version of one of their songs, trying to hold the crowd, but everyone knew something bigger was happening. In a small dressing room backstage, Bob Marley sat on a wooden chair, no bodyguards, no weapons, just him in his sweaty stage clothes, dreadlocks tied back, when Samuel Clarke was brought in. Clarke stopped in the doorway. His whole body shook. "You're alone?" "We're never alone," Bob replied. "Jah is here. Your conscience is here. My ancestors are here. Sit." Clarke remained standing. "I suppose you want to know why." "I know why," Bob said quietly. "Politics. Someone paid you. Someone who didn't want the peace concert to happen. Someone who thought killing Bob Marley would kill the message." Clarke's scarred hands clenched and unclenched. "How are you so calm?" "I tried to murder you. Your wife. I shot at your children's father." "Stop." This is where the story becomes something else entirely. Bob Marley stood up slowly, and Clarke flinched. But Bob simply walked to a small table where his guitar case lay open. From inside, he pulled out something wrapped in cloth. Clarke tensed, ready to run or fight. But it wasn't a weapon. It was a bullet. The bullet that doctors had removed from Bob's arm in 1976. He'd kept it, carried it on every tour, a reminder of mortality and survival. "This is yours," Bob said, holding it out to Clarke. Clarke stared at the bullet, confused. "I don't understand." "Take it. It belongs to you. You fired it. I just carried it for a while." With trembling hands, Clarke took the bullet. It was small, deformed from impact, still stained with old blood. "4 years ago," Bob continued, "you gave me something. Fear, anger, paranoia. I've been carrying those too. Tonight I give them back." What Clarke did next stunned even Bob Marley. The would-be assassin fell to his knees, the bullet rolling from his hand across the floor. "I haven't slept," he whispered. 4 years I haven't slept through a single night. I see your face. I see your wife's face. I see your children who almost lost their father." "Good," Bob said. "That means you're still human." "I came tonight to finish it," Clarke admitted, and Bob tensed. "Not to kill you, to confess, to turn myself in. I've been following your tour for 3 weeks, trying to find the courage. When you looked at me tonight, I thought this is Jah giving me the chance." Bob sat back down, studying this broken man. "Who sent you?" "Men who are now dead themselves," Clarke replied. "The violence they started consumed them too. That's what violence does. It eats everything, even those who feed it." "And you? What have you been doing these 4 years?" Clarke laughed bitterly. "Dying slowly. Drinking, fighting, running. I became a ghost, haunting myself." The conversation that followed would change both men forever. "You know what saved me that night?" Bob asked. "Not the doctors, not luck. Music. 2 days after you shot me, I stood on stage at Smile, Jamaica, 60,000 people, and I played. You understand? The bullet was still in my arm, and I played, because if I didn't, you would have won. Violence would have won." "I was there," Clarke said suddenly. Bob's eyes widened. "What?" "At Smile, Jamaica. In the crowd. I had to see if you'd show up. When you came on stage, when you showed your wounds, when you sang, I knew I'd failed at more than just killing you. I'd failed at killing what you represent." "And what do I represent?" "Hope," Clarke said simply. "The possibility that things can change without blood." From outside the door, Williams knocked urgently. "Bob, the crowd is getting restless. We need to do something." But Bob wasn't finished. What he said next would define the entire night. "Samuel Clarke," Bob said, using the man's real name like a prayer, "you have 2 choices tonight. You can leave here, keep running, keep dying slowly, or You can help me prove something." Clarke looked up, confused. "Come on stage with me," Bob said. The room went absolutely silent. Even the muffled music from outside seemed to pause. "You're mad," Clarke whispered. "Maybe, but think about it. The man who tried to kill Bob Marley and Bob Marley himself on the same stage, not fighting, talking. Show them that if we can face each other, anyone can. They'll tear me apart. No, they'll watch us choose peace over war. They'll see that forgiveness is not weakness. It's the ultimate rebellion against the cycle of violence." Clarke stood up slowly, the bullet still on the floor between them. "I don't deserve forgiveness." "Nobody deserves it," Bob replied. "That's why it's called grace." What happened when they walked onto that stage together was unprecedented. The crowd had been growing more agitated. Some were leaving, others were shouting for refunds, the wailers were running out of instrumental material. Then the side stage door opened, and Bob Marley walked out. The crowd erupted in relief and cheers. But then they noticed he wasn't alone. A thin, scared-looking white man walked beside him, and something about the way they moved together, careful, deliberate, made the audience quiet down. Bob took the microphone. "Boston," he said, his voice carrying across the hushed venue. "4 years ago, this man beside me tried to kill me." The silence was so complete, you could hear the building's heating system tick. "He shot me. He shot my wife. He tried to silence the message of one love with bullets." Someone in the crowd shouted, "Get him." Others started to surge forward. "Stop." Bob's voice boomed through the speakers. "Stop. This is exactly what they want. They want us to answer violence with violence. They want us to prove that peace is just a dream, that love is weaker than hate." The crowd froze, confused, angry, but listening. "This man, Samuel Clarke, came here tonight, not to hurt me, but to face me. And I'm asking you, all of you, to witness something. Not revenge, not violence, but the hardest thing any of us can do." He turned to Clarke, who stood trembling before 3,500 pairs of eyes. "I forgive you," Bob said simply. The words hung in the air, like a physical presence. Clarke collapsed again, this time onto the stage itself, sobbing. The sound was amplified by the stage monitors, raw and broken. Some in the audience looked away, uncomfortable with such naked emotion. Others leaned forward, transfixed. Bob helped Clarke to his feet. "Tell them," he said gently. "Tell them what violence gave you." Clarke took the microphone with shaking hands. His voice was barely a whisper, but the sound system carried it to every corner of the venue. "Nothing," Clarke said. "Violence gave me nothing but nightmares. I was paid $5,000 to kill Bob Marley, $5,000 to destroy a man who sang about love. And for 4 years, I've been in hell, my own hell, created by my own hands." Someone in the balcony started to clap slowly, not applause, but recognition. Others joined. It wasn't celebration. It was something deeper, sadder, more complex. "I don't ask for your forgiveness," Clarke continued. "I don't deserve it, but I'm here to say that Bob Marley is right. Violence doesn't end anything. It just creates more violence. I'm living proof, or dying proof, of that." Then something extraordinary began to happen in the Boston Music Hall. An old woman in the front row stood up. "My son was killed in Vietnam," she called out. "For years I hated the Vietnamese, but hate didn't bring him back. It just killed me slowly, too." A young black man stood up in the balcony. "My brother was shot by police. I wanted revenge so bad I could taste it, but revenge wouldn't bring him back either." One by one, people began standing and sharing. A former gang member, an abuse survivor, a man who'd lost his family in a drunk driving accident, The Boston Music Hall became a cathedral of confession, of pain acknowledged, of the possibility of something beyond vengeance. Bob took back the microphone. "You see," he said, "this is what they fear. Not our anger. They know how to use that. They fear this, us choosing to break the cycle." But the most powerful moment was yet to come. Bob picked up his guitar. Someone had retrieved it from the crowd. One string broken, but otherwise intact. He began to play, just simple chords. Then he started to sing, not performing but sharing. "The man who shot me stands beside me now, not as enemy, but as teacher somehow, teaching me that hate is just fear with a gun. Teaching me that healing has just begun." The wailers slowly joined in, creating a musical bed under Bob's spontaneous creation. Clarke stood frozen on stage, tears streaming down his face. "Samuel," Bob said, stopping the music, "you came to my house with violence. Tonight, I invite you to my other house. This stage, this music, stay, bear witness. Show them transformation is possible." For the rest of the concert, Samuel Clarke stood on stage, not performing, just standing there, a living reminder of the possibility of redemption. Some in the audience couldn't look at him, others couldn't look away, but everyone felt the weight of what they were witnessing. Peter Tosh would later say in a private interview, "That night in Boston, I thought Bob had gone mad. But then I understood. He wasn't forgiving for Clarke's sake. He was forgiving to free himself, to show us all how to free ourselves." What nobody knew was that this was one of Bob Marley's last concerts. The cancer that would kill him in May 1981 was already spreading through his body. He knew he was dying, though few others did. This knowledge gave him an urgency, a need to demonstrate the principles he'd sung about while he still could. 3 weeks after Boston, Bob collapsed during a concert in Pittsburgh. The tour was canceled. He would perform only a handful more times before his death. Samuel Clarke was there when Bob died. He'd been accepted, improbably, into Bob's extended circle, not as a friend exactly, but as a reminder, a witness, a living testament to the possibility of change. Rita Marley would later say, "Bob kept Samuel close to prove to himself that forgiveness was real, not just words in a song." At Bob's funeral in Jamaica, Clarke stood with thousands of others. He'd gained weight, lost the tremor, looked almost normal, except for the profound sadness in his eyes. A reporter who recognized him tried to interview him, but Clarke would only say, "I took Bob Marley's life in 1976, not his physical life, but his sense of safety, his peace. In Boston, he gave me back my life, showed me I could be more than my worst moment. The debt can never be repaid." But here's what really happened in the years that followed. Samuel Clarke dedicated his remaining years to violence intervention, using his story, the story of the man who tried to kill Bob Marley and was forgiven. He worked with gang members, with guerrilla fighters in Central America, with anyone trapped in cycles of violence. He started the Boston Moment Foundation, named after that night. Its mission to create spaces where perpetrators and victims could meet safely, could humanize each other, could break the cycle. By the time Clarke died in 2003, the foundation had facilitated over 1,000 reconciliations. In his final interview, Clarke said, "Bob Marley could have had me arrested in Boston, could have had me beaten, could have used me to fuel more anger. Instead, he used me to prove a point, that the hardest revolution is the one that happens in our own hearts. He turned me from a weapon into a witness." The Boston Music Hall has a plaque now, installed in 2010. Most people don't notice it. Small and brass, near the stage door. It reads, October 28, 1980. On this stage, Bob Marley and Samuel Clarke proved that forgiveness is stronger than violence. The full recording of that concert exists in a private collection. The owner, who wishes to remain anonymous, says the most powerful moment isn't the music. It's the 47 minutes when the audience shared their stories, when 3,500 strangers became a community united by the possibility of transcending pain. There's something else, something mystical, that multiple witnesses reported, but that doesn't appear on the recording. During the final song, as Bob played with his broken guitar string, several people swear they saw something impossible. Behind Bob and Samuel, a faint light, like figures made of brightness. Some said it looked like all the victims of violence, standing in solidarity. Others said it was simpler, just a trick of the stage lights through tears. But Marcus Thompson, the security chief, wrote in his private journal, "I'm not a mystical man, but I saw them, the ones killed by violence, the ones lost to revenge. They were there in that hall, witnessing the moment two men chose a different path. Maybe I'm crazy, but I know what I saw." 3 months before his death, Bob received a letter from a teenager in Boston who'd been at the concert. She wrote, "Mr. Marley, I came to your show planning to kill myself after I'd been assaulted, and I couldn't see past the pain. But watching you forgive that man, watching him break down, watching the audience share their stories, I realized I could survive this. I could be more than what happened to me. You saved my life by saving his." Bob kept that letter with him until he died. Rita found it in his jacket pocket at the hospital, worn from being read so many times. The real truth about that night in Boston is this: it wasn't about Bob Marley being a saint. He wasn't. He was angry, scared, human. Throwing the guitar was real fear, real trauma. But in that moment backstage, he made a choice that defined not just his legacy, but the possibility of what we all could be. Samuel Clarke's son, born in 1985, 4 years after Bob's death, is now a conflict resolution specialist with the United Nations. His name is Robert. Robert Clarke carries two things with him always: a photo of Bob Marley and the bullet his father tried to kill him with, now worn smooth from handling, transformed from a symbol of violence into a reminder of grace. Every October 28th, survivors of violence gather at the Boston Music Hall, now renamed the Boston Center for Arts. They don't talk about revenge or justice in the traditional sense. They talk about the third option, the path Bob Marley and Samuel Clarke showed was possible. The guitar Bob threw that night is in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame now. The broken string was never repaired. The museum placard reads, "Sometimes things need to break before they can heal properly." But here's the detail that changes everything. In 2019, audio forensics experts analyzing the bootleg recording of that night made a discovery. At the exact moment Bob said, "I forgive you" to Clarke, there's a frequency spike that shouldn't exist, a harmonic that no instrument on stage could have produced. It lasts exactly 3 seconds. When slowed down and enhanced, it sounds like hundreds of voices saying the word peace in different languages simultaneously. Scientists say it's just acoustic interference, maybe feedback from the old sound system. But those who were there that night know better. They know that for one moment in a Boston music hall, something larger than human conflict touched down, witnessed two men choose light over darkness, and left its mark on the recording. The Boston moment, as it's now known in conflict resolution circles, has been studied, analyzed, replicated, but it can't be fully explained. How does a man forgive his would-be assassin? How does an assassin become an advocate for peace? How does a concert become a truth and reconciliation commission? The answer Bob Marley gave 3 weeks before his death was simple. Music is the space between the notes. Forgiveness is the space between the pain and what comes next. In Boston, we all lived in that space for one night, and once you've been there, you can never fully leave. Samuel Clarke's gravestone reads, "He died to violence on October 28, 1980. He was reborn to peace the same night." Somewhere, in whatever dimension the departed inhabit, Bob Marley and Samuel Clarke are probably still talking, still working through the mystery of how hatred transforms into healing, how concerts become ceremonies, how the worst night of someone's life can become the beginning of their redemption. One love. Even for those who brought hate, especially for them. That's the revolution Bob Marley died believing in. That's the revolution that started in Boston when a reggae legend threw his guitar and caught a soul instead.